Hello everyone, really lovely that you joining me today for this video lesson which is called How to Think Like an English Student. So we're going to start with a quick little starter today. If you haven't seen these before, I'm going to give you 10 clues and all the answers to the clues rhyme. So we've got 9, just 9 today. So just pause the video for a second, grab a pen, grab a piece of paper, and see if you can write down all 9 answers. Okay, let's see what you got. Hopefully you got some of these at least. They all rhyme with each other. And here are the answers. Number 1 was stork. Number 2 was hawk. Number 3 was talk. Number 4 was pork. Number 5 was cork. Number 6 was chalk. Number 7 was stalk. Number 8 was gawk. And number 9, of course, was walk. Give yourself a massive round of applause if you got anything like more than 5 out of 9. I think it's a really brilliant result. Okay, starter out of the way. Let's just think about what we're doing then in this video. So first of all, this is the first of a series of videos. I am going to be recording a few videos between now and the summer, which are meant to be focusing on really important skills in English, things that really matter to English, things that you'll revisit again and again in your English lessons, to make sure that you understand what it means to be a good English student and what it means to do really well in English. Okay, so they're not really connected necessarily with the stuff that you're doing, the stuff on Show My Homework and the other things that you're doing. They're things that you can come back to again and again, because they're really important skills. So here are a few of the things that I hope we're going to be covering in these lessons. And as you can see, this is stuff that really matters in English. It's stuff that really keeps coming up again and again. So I'll be sharing all of these on Teams. I'll email now and again just to remind you they exist as well, but they'll be going onto Teams first and foremost. So please do get involved. If there's stuff that we're not covering that you really want us to cover, please do get in touch as well. Okay, so our first video, this video, is about a kind of really important thing, which is what does it mean to be an English student and to think like an English student. Some people find English hard, and some people find that they get stuck in English a lot, and the reason usually is because they're not doing one of these 3 things. These are the 3 sort of most important thinking skills that we have in English. Here they come. First of all, connecting abstract and concrete things. I'll explain what that means in a minute. Secondly, thinking in a complex way, so complex thinking. And thirdly, chains of reasoning, linking things together, linking your points together. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about each of those 3, and then we're going to do a quick activity where we're actually going to put some of these things into practice. So if you haven't yet got yourself a pencil and pen, please do pause the video, grab yourself some paper, grab yourself a pen, and then I'm going to go through these 3. You might want to write down some notes, things that matter to you, and you'll certainly need a piece of paper when we do the exercise. Okay, so just go and get a piece of paper if you need one. Brilliant, good, let's carry on. So I have to keep moving my picture around. There we go. So what does this mean? Okay, so as I'm sure you know, there's 2 sorts of things in the world. There are abstract things and there are concrete things. Concrete things are things that we can see and things that we can have in our pockets and things that we can say hello to and things that we can sit on and all that sort of thing. Those are concrete things, real things in the world. Abstract things are equally important. Abstract things are things like emotions. They're things like ideas, they're things like concepts, they're things like relationships. Okay, so when you're usually taught about abstract nouns in primary school, you're usually taught about emotions and things like that. And emotions are important, but it's also about things like abstract ideas, relationships, concepts. Okay, so sorry, I've just repeated myself. So this is what English students do. So we're moving between the stuff that's in the real world, the concrete stuff, and the abstract stuff, the things in our heads, the ideas, relationships, and thoughts. Okay? How do we do that? Well, we do it all the time in language. So, when we're talking to each other, we will move between talking about something real in the real world and then talking about something abstract. Writers do it too, and one of the big ways that they do it is through imagery. Imagery is such an important thing in English. Part of the reason why it's such an important thing is because it's this bridge between the abstract stuff and the concrete stuff. So most of the time, if you have an image in English, if you have a metaphor or a simile in English, for example, it's linking what is kind of intangible, what you can't put your finger on, what you can't necessarily describe, and describing it in a way that makes it seem real, that kind of pins it down. Okay, so if I want to describe my feelings of dread and horror about being stuck at home in lockdown, I might compare it with something that's concrete. I might compare it with being in prison or being in a swimming through treacle or some other sort of concrete connection like that. Very, very famous quotation, which is the kind of motto of any English teacher, is that one: only connect. English teaching, English learning, English studying is about making connections. Okay, and it's for you, the English student, to make those connections yourselves and to try and link things up. It could be about linking the past and the present. It could be about linking your experience with someone else's experience. It could be about linking something in the real world with something in the imaginary world, all that kind of thing. Okay, it's all about the connections. And these are the kinds of phrases that we use as English students to talk about connecting the abstract and the concrete. This word here, reflects, is a really powerful one. Yeah, this is what our connection is about. It's about a reflection. So this thing over here reflects this thing over here. So we use that word all the time as English students. Symbolizes, again, is one that's really useful. Something stands for something else. Something means something else. Symbolizes. And echoes is another one with the same kind of weight to it. This thing reminds me of, or sounds like, or suggests this other thing over here. Okay, so this concrete thing that's happening here echoes the abstract thing that's going on beneath the surface. Okay, our second way of thinking that English students do all the time is thinking in a complex way. What does that mean? Well, it's about what it isn't, I guess. What we try and avoid is simplicity. Okay, so we don't try and find one way to look at something. Okay, so whenever you find yourself writing in your English pieces of work that, I don't know, Prospero is a evil character. Okay, that's a very simple way of looking at Prospero. Juliet is innocent. That's a very simple way of looking at Juliet. And we are, as good English students, we immediately reject that kind of simplicity. We try and look for levels. We try and look for alternatives. Okay, that's what makes us different from math students and math teachers, because math teachers try and make everything really, really simple and try and reduce everything down to the simplest possible level. English tries to go the other way, and it keeps asking, okay, well, what if we do this? What if we do this? What if we do that? Let's look at it another way. Let's look at it another way. How else can we see it? And this is a phrase I like to use a lot. It's not as simple as that. It's not as straightforward as that. It can't be as simple as that. And that's something that good English students try and do all the time. They try and say, okay, It can't be that simple. So how else could we look at it? These are the kind of phrases we might want to use if we're thinking in a complex way. We might want to talk about the difference between what's on the surface and what's underneath. So on the surface, it's like this. Underneath, it's like that. We might want to look at change over time. Okay, change in the way a character is represented in a book. Maybe a change in the way we have read something or experienced something or thought about something. So at first, it seems like this. Later on, it seems like that. Similarly, although sometimes this is true, at other times this is true. Okay, so that's what we mean by complexity. Not just having one way of looking at something, but expanding it to look at other different levels of meaning. Okay, and our third way of thinking as English students is we think about chains of reasoning. So what does that mean? It means we're thinking about connecting, not just connecting the abstract and the concrete, but thinking about our own points, our own ideas, and how they link up together. Okay, so when we're looking at, for example, a character in a book, if we're looking at Jack in Lord of the Flies, there isn't just one idea that we have about him. We have lots and lots of ideas that we have about him, and we link them up together, we connect them up together. Okay, we also connect evidence with the points that we make. So we look for words, we look for phrases that support the things we have to say. We use them to support those points. The points then lead us on to other points. They lead us on to counterexamples. They lead us on to different points of view. You know, we don't necessarily end up with one kind of single idea that we're supporting. We're linking up different ideas together. Okay. And the reason why we ask you to write essays in English is in order to practice that chaining. Okay. Moving from one point to another point, to another point, to another point. Yeah, we don't just ask you to write sentences or paragraphs. We sometimes ask you to write bigger pieces, because that really is what we're trying to do as really good English students, is to have a really complex chain of reasoning where there are lots of different ideas and they're linked together. Here are some phrases you might want to use when you're chaining your reasoning, when you're linking ideas together. You could say, perhaps this suggests that. I love that phrase. I use it all the time. Perhaps this suggests that. I love the word perhaps because it allows for lots of different ways of thinking. It's not just saying this is the only point of view. I'm giving you a point of view or one interpretation, and then I'm going to build on it and give you another one. Perhaps this suggests that. However, it could also suggest that. Similarly is another lovely one, to link ideas. So here's an idea. Similarly, here's another idea. And sorry, this one's not on the screen at the moment. There we go. This could also imply that. Okay, so taking one point, it suggests this, it implies that. However, it could also imply this other thing. Okay, so when we talk about chains of reasoning, we talk about developing ideas, linking ideas, one idea building on another one. Okay, so those are my three ways that English students think. What we're going to do now is we're going to have a look at a poem. Some of you will know it. If I've taught you ever in your life, you may have seen this poem with me. If you haven't, it doesn't matter. You can still have a look at it and think about it. This is a poem called, here it comes, Wires. Okay, it's a nice short poem, but it's a really interesting one to think like an English student about. Okay, so here comes the poem. I'm going to read it as well. The widest prairies have electric fences, for though old cattle know they must not stray, young steers are always scenting purer water, not here but anywhere. Beyond the wires leads them to blunder up against the wires, whose muscle-shredding violence gives no quarter. Young steers become old cattle from that day, electric limits to their widest senses. So this is a poem about cows, right? Cows in a field. We've got old cattle, we've got young steers, so old cows and young cows. There's electric fences around the edge of the very, very edge of the farm. It's a really massive farm, the widest prairie. The old cows know they can't go outside the farm, but the young cows are always trying to go outside the farm because they're scenting purer water. What happens when they do? Beyond the wires leads them to blunder up against the wires, whose muscle shredding violence gives no quarter. So when they get to the wires, they get this shock of their lives and they realise that they can't actually leave the farm. Young steers become old cattle from that day, electric limits to their widest senses. Okay, I've given a kind of explanation of that, but that's just the first step for an English student. I want you to think about these three things, and I just want you to take a couple of minutes to write down some notes. So pause the video and just write down a few ideas. First of all, about abstract and concrete. So how does the concrete stuff here about the cows reflect something abstract? How do you connect the abstract and the concrete? I want you to try and be complex, so not just think about one thing. If you've written down one thing, think about how you would develop it and expand it and explain it into another thing. On the surface, it seems like this. Underneath, it seems like that. And then I want you to try and chain your ideas as well. So make connections between the reasoning. Okay, let's pause and see what you come up with. And I will be, when you're done, just press play again. Okay, well done, everyone. I hope that was straightforward. Let's see what you came up with and what I came up with, and see if they're similar. So this is my answer, and I'm just going to explain as I go along how. Move myself down there, shall I? I'll just explain as I go along how I think I've used those three kind of English student thinking skills. So Philip Larkin uses the image of discontented cows in a field to explore human freedom and our attitudes to it. So I'm starting off by making that connection between the concrete stuff, this is a poem about cows, with the abstract stuff. Actually, it's a poem about human freedom. At first sight, and I'm going to be complex, at first sight it appears as though this presents a conventional view of old and young people, that the old are wise and experienced, and that the young are foolish and naive. Okay, so I'm explaining my kind of initial point of view, but that at first sight it appears as though I'm going to say something else because I'm going to be complex. But it isn't as straightforward as this. Actually, both the young and old cows are deeply unhappy. The younger cows with their desperation to find a different life, and the older cows with their numbed hopelessness. Okay, so I've started off by saying, okay, this is one way to read the poem, but this is quite a simple way. This is my at first sight way. And then I'm saying, okay, actually, here's another way of reading the poem, which is a bit more sophisticated. On we go. Perhaps this reflects the poet's view of life as hopeless, that there is no point in striving for change or trying to reach a better kind of life. Okay, so here I am linking my ideas together with a perhaps this reflects. Okay, I'm moving on from one point to build in another point. So I'm making that chain of reasoning. However, I love howevers, don't you? So however is saying, okay, I'm bringing another point, a contrasting point. However, it could also be argued that there is a kind of optimism and hope in the poem too. The young cows keep searching for something new after all, so perhaps Larkin is suggesting that hope is always a part of human life. Okay, so I'm having made my point that the poem suggests that life is hopeless. I'm then giving a counter argument or a counter example. Actually, here's another way of looking at it. Maybe actually life is, or maybe the poem is actually full of optimism. Okay, right, that's all for me for today. So please do join us for the next video. I do hope you found this helpful. Please do get in touch with me, jlewis at newsteadwood.co.uk, if you've got any comments or questions, or if there's anything you want to feature in future videos. Okay, thank you very much indeed.